Tonight's topic is Elijah the prophet. And Elijah has a great reputation, as I'm sure most of you know. He's around. We have a special seat for him at circumcisions. He's also apparently around on the night of the Seder night, where we set aside a special cup for him. We open the door. Who is this person, Elijah? Elijah was a prophet in the northern kingdom of Israel, as we discussed last week, the two kingdoms, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. He was a prophet in the northern kingdom of Israel in the time of the king Ahab, and his wife Jezebel. And he had tremendous clashes with them all through his history. Eventually, as a result of these clashes, he gets so depressed, he goes to God and says, I want to go, I want to die. That's it. And God sends him into the desert to Mount Sinai. He goes on Mount Sinai and he has a revelation over there. And God tells him to go back and prepare things for the end. To continue to appoint another student in his place. And then the ending is in a fiery chariot taking Elijah up to heaven, whatever that means, which we have to discuss. That was a brief account of the life of Elijah. We know there are many legends built around the life of Elijah. Let's discuss briefly the two events which I mentioned before. There's a Kiseh Shel Eliyahu, the chair of Elijah, which is the time of circumcision, which is placed at the right-hand side of the Sandak, or the godfather who holds the baby. It's a beautiful concept based on the idea which is brought down on the Midrash. The Midrash brings down this idea that Elijah complains to God. Elijah complained to God, the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant. So the Midrash says, what covenant was Elijah talking about? He was talking about the covenant of circumcision. He was complaining to God, the children of Israel have forsaken the covenant. So the Midrash says, because of that, God says, you've brought charges against Israel, they have forsaken my covenant, therefore you will have to be present at every circumcision. You're going to be the witness that they are fulfilling the covenant. That's a beautiful idea. There's a person who makes claims against the Jews will have to be witness that they are fulfilling these things and not breaking them. So that's what the Zohar, the Kabbalistic work, says, that Elijah is present at every circumcision, and that's the concept of the chair of Elijah. That's the concept of the chair of Elijah, the Brit and the circumcision. The second concept which we have in Jewish law is the concept of the cup of Elijah. At the Pesach, the Seder night, we find there's a cup which is filled up and left on the table for Elijah to come and drink. We open the door. What's going on over here? What does that cup represent? It doesn't have such a mystical meaning after all. There's a debate in the Talmud, how many cups of wine are necessary for a person to fulfill his obligation in the Passover Seder. So one opinion says 4, but there's another opinion that says 5. There are 4 cups of wine because they're based on the 4 languages of redemption, which are mentioned in the first Torah reading in the book of Exodus. I will take them out, I will take them for myself, I will redeem them, and I will take them out into the desert. So 4 different languages of redemption mentioned, and we toast God with each cup. We toast God for each language of redemption. God removed us for slavery, different kinds of slavery, 4 different ways. So we have 4 cups of wine. The other opinion says, no, there are 5 cups of wine. We have a general rule in the Talmud, but there's a debate which is, there's no majority opinion. Talmud says, Teku. What does Teku mean? Tishbi yitaretz kushot bayot. The Tishbite, who is Elijah the prophet, was Eliyahu HaTishbi. He was known as the Tishbite. He came from this town. And it says, he will come and he will answer the questions. So if there's a debate which is unanswered, we leave it to him to come and solve it. So what happened was, this 5th cup is poured and not drunk. We follow the opinion of the 4 cups of wine. But since there's a doubt, we pour 5 cups of wine. And we call it the cup of Elijah because Elijah is going to answer the question whether there are 4 cups or 5 cups. Eventually it became known as the cup of Elijah. And on this comes the legend that you open the door, Elijah's going to come and drink it. Very similar. I think Santa Claus legend came from this idea. You know, Elijah's going to come in. How's he going to come in, Dad? He's going to come through the chimney. He's going to come through the whatever. I think that's where that whole idea came from, based on this concept of Elijah coming in Pesach. It's also, Passover was the time of redemption. We find that the prophet Malachi, who was the last of the prophets, some people say he was Mordechai, he brings this down. Beautiful, the last page of the last prophet. Let me just quote it to you, such a beautiful prophecy. So Malachi tells us, since the days of your forefathers, you have veered away from my laws, and you have not observed them. Return to me, and I will return to you, says God. But you say, for what should we repent? And you say, how have we stolen from you? So he continues, and I will rebuke the devourer for you, and they will not destroy you. All the nations will praise you, for you will be a land of delight. Your words have become harsh against me, says God, but you say, how have we spoken against you? You have said it is useless to serve God. What gain is there for us that we have kept his watch, that we walk submissively before God? It was people, the Jews asked, so where did it get us that we're keeping God's law? So now we praise the wicked. We're going to give up. We're just going to praise the wicked. We're going to go into evil. They have even tested God and escaped. The evildoers have tested God, and they're free and they're walking around. They're millionaires today. So therefore, God says, God answers, says God, they will be a precious treasure for me, the ones who keep my word. And I will have mercy on them as a man has mercy on his son who serves him. Then you will return and see the difference between the righteous and the wicked, between the one who serves God and one who does not serve God. For behold, the day is coming, burning like an oven, where all the wicked people and all the evildoers will be like straw. And that coming day will burn them up, says God. But a sun of righteousness will shine for you who fear my name, with healing in its rays, and you will go out and flourish like calves fattened in the stall. Remember the Torah of Moses my servant, which I commanded him at Sinai for all of Israel. Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and awesome day of God. And he will turn back to God the hearts of the fathers with their sons, and the hearts of sons with their fathers, lest I come and strike the land with utter destruction. And the custom is to repeat the last line again. Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and awesome day of Hashem. So that is basically the last prophecy we have, ends off with this foretelling the future, is that Elijah the prophet is coming. And that's a beautiful concept, is Elijah will come to announce the day of redemption. So Elijah has this place in Jewish literature of being the foreteller of good things, the tidings, good tidings, and preparing the day of the Messianic era. We find there's other things which Elijah talks about, but let's discuss prophecy as a beginning, because Elijah was a prophet after all. What is prophecy? Maimonides has a whole section on prophecy. He tells us that the foundations of our religion is to know that there is such a thing as prophecy. Because we have prophets, and all the books of the Bible written by 24 books of the Bible written by the prophets. So we have to know that one of the foundations of our religion is there is such a thing as prophecy. That is good and that is bad as well, because anyone can come along and say, you know what, I'm a prophet, believe me. So obviously there are guides to tell us who to believe and who not to believe. What are the criteria for a prophet? How does a person become a prophet? The first thing is great wisdom. One of the keys for prophecy is wisdom. A fool cannot become a prophet. Secondly, the second criteria is a control, superhuman control of a person's desires. A person who's always in control of their desires, of their temper, of their humility. Everyone is in control, total control of their desires. So a person in total control of themselves, that is a prerequisite for prophecy. The third thing is the mind is bound to their Creator every second of the day. In other words, all they think about, holy thoughts. I want to serve God. How do I serve God? I want to know God. How do I know God? So a person's mind is bound with holy thoughts all the time, applying the great intellect to their wisdom, just like these great scientists, all they're thinking about all day. Einstein would be thinking about theory of relativity all day. So the prophets would be thinking about godly things, spiritual things all day. The fourth criteria is shalem begufo, which means perfect in their physical functions. In other words, they have to have health. One of the prerequisites, the fourth prerequisite of prophecy is strength. Because for a prophet to prophesy, it's a tremendously painful process for the body. Sometimes they go off their food for days on end. A person needs tremendous strength to be able to be a prophet. Also, the mind must be tremendously strong, because they're hovering in a state of seeing things. They start seeing things, and they're going to have a strong mind to be able to know the difference between a prophecy and reality. There's a very fine line of madness. A person goes crazy thinking of a super real phenomenon and loses the link to this world. It's one of the dangers of prophecy. So only a person with a very strong body and a strong mind can become a prophet. So those are the four prerequisites of prophecy which are brought down by Maimonides. But we do believe in prophets, and it's possible for anyone to be a prophet, and these are the ways of becoming a prophet. A person who becomes a prophet, his soul is elevated to the elevation of the angels. Certain angels are called Ishim. Ishim, which really means men. It's a kind of angel which is a lower category of angel. And that's what it says by King Saul. When he started prophesying, he turned into another man. As he turned into one of these beings, his soul was elevated and was on the level of those beings and could see a different perspective on life. There are different levels of prophets. Just like there's different levels of wisdom, there are also different levels of prophets. All the prophets saw their visions in a dream, either in the day or night. They had to go to sleep. The only prophet who could actually walk around physically and be alert and have visions at the same time was Moses. So the prophecy of Moses, the Bible tells us, is there was no other prophet like Moses. That's how the Bible ends off. The 5 books of Moses ends off. There was no other prophet like Moses, which is a very fundamental of the Jewish faith. And that is why no other person can come along and say, my prophecy supersedes that of Moses, which is what the Christians try to do with JC. They came along, they said his prophecy supersedes Moses' prophecy, and therefore you don't have to keep the 10 Commandments, you don't have to keep the 613 Commandments anymore. This book, the New Testament, supersedes the Old Testament. That's where they came along, but that's one of the 13 principles of faith, which the 5 books of Moses ends off with, is that there was no other prophet, and there will be no other prophet like Moses. And the difference that Maimonides explains is only Moses could see these things in a stable, normal state. The other prophets were in a state of meditation and a trance. Moses was on a... You could talk to him and he could be talking to God at the same time, one after the other, with no preparation. He was always in tune with the divine. That was the prophecy of Moses. It's a very high level prophecy. So any prophet could not prophesy any time he wanted. They would have to meditate and prepare themselves for days on end. Some of them would prepare themselves for days on end and never get prophecy. Those are called the sons of the prophets. If you look through the book of Kings 2, where it talks about the prophet Elijah, it mentions the sons of the prophets, who are the students of the prophets, who were busy learning the art of prophecy, meditating. Most of them did not actually prophesy. So it was a gift from God, whether the person would prophesy or not. Moses had the gift that he could prophesy any time he wanted. So we find other prophets, Daniel, Ezekiel, they all had their visions, but they could not have these visions any time they wanted. Only Moses could go and ask God questions. When they asked him questions, he would go and ask God questions. Big difference in the prophecy. So people who were studying to be prophets, they were called the sons of the prophets. They would not necessarily have prophecy. They were preparing themselves. And then when they had the prophecy, they were elevated to the level of prophets. You have the sons of the prophets, the low level, and then you have the prophets themselves. So Elijah was a prophet, and that's how the story starts off, with King Ahab marrying his wife Jezebel. Jezebel was from the northern kingdom, from Lebanon, Tyre in those days, Tyre, which today is a city in Lebanon. And she introduced into Israel false gods. Gods, Baal Zevuv, the god of the flies, Lord of the Flies, became a book later on, no relation. That was one of the famous gods at that time. And the second god she introduced was the god Ashtarte, which was the god of trees. They'd pick a tree, a very tall tree, and they would worship the tree, or the god of the trees. Those are two gods. She brought in the prophets, 450 prophets for the Baal, 100 prophets for the god of the trees. And they tried to convert as many Jews as possible to their gods. Ahab the king didn't really care. He was interested in good relations with his neighbors. It's a very similar story to Solomon. He brought in his strange wives, trying to cultivate relationships with the neighbors. The neighbors were pagans. He married their daughter, the daughter of the king of Tyre. She comes in, tries to influence the Jewish beliefs with her own gods. Ahab himself must have been a pretty religious guy, because we find that his two sons had names of God in their names. Yehoram, first three letters of God's name. Ram means high, the high God. He named his son the high God. Amaziah, Yam is the last, the first two letters of God's name. So hallelujah, praise be Yah, which is God. So you find whenever the name ends with Yah, it's referring God's name. So he named his children. It's interesting. The king names his sons, gives them good Jewish names. His wife is, on the other hand, worshipping idols. So you can see the dichotomy over here. All the king was interested in was basically good ties with his neighbors. Didn't want to rock the boat. Let his wife do whatever she wanted. She could serve her gods. She could do whatever she wanted. She could bring her own prophets in, until Elijah comes and rebukes him. That causes the whole problem. The first rebuke was, Elijah tells him, there's going to be a famine in the land. There's a famine, terrible famine. There's no water. The king is out there searching for water when Elijah appears, and he tells him, I'm going to kill you. He says, don't worry. You want water? This is how you're going to do it. We're going to arrange a duel between me and the prophets, the false prophets. Have anyone been to Har Carmel, Mount Carmel in Haifa? What's over there? There's a Carmelite monastery. This is where they got it from, the story of Elijah. There's also the Baha'is build their temple over there. It's amazing how everyone wants to get a bit of the action. Everyone wants to get a bit of the action. Wherever the Jews went, build the holy places. Other religions came along and took over. Same thing on Mount Sinai. There's the monastery of Santa Catarina. What they claim is Mount Sinai. We don't know where Mount Sinai is, which is interesting. What happened on Mount Carmel? Elijah tells the king, let's make a duel. How long are you going to waver between the false prophets of Baal and the true God? How long are you going to waver? The people are wavering. Bring all the people to Mount Carmel. Let the prophets of Baal come as well. Let them try and offer up a sacrifice to God. If their God will send fire from heaven and devour the sacrifice, let everyone worship him. If our God comes and brings a fire to the sacrifice, then we'll prove who's God. It's a proof who is God. And that's what happens. They bring two different sacrifices. The priests of Baal, 450 of them, go and pray and cry to their God. Nothing happens. Elijah makes fun of them. Maybe he's sleeping. Maybe he's going to the bathroom. Maybe he's on a vacation. Nothing happens. When Elijah starts building an altar and dedicating the sacrifice, fire comes from heaven, and the people go wild. Yes, we now believe in God. Okay, that was a revelation which they had. They now believe in God. These prophets were killed. But what happens is the queen declares war on him. Queen Jezebel wasn't so impressed. She wanted her prophets back. He had killed her prophets. She says, the way you did to my prophets, I'm going to do to you. And what happens? No one supports him. All the people that witnessed this, you'd think the people were on his side now. You'd think the king would be on his side now. Nothing. It's interesting. Now, what is the most holy mountain in Jewish law? Huh? No? The Temple Mount. Wailing Wall. The Wailing Wall is just behind it. It's built on the Temple Mount. That was the Temple Mount. That's where the temple was. Why was the temple built on that area? Anyone know? Because according to Jewish legend, that's where Abraham offered up his son, Isaac, on that mountain, Mount Moriah. That Mount Moriah became eventually the Temple Mount. It's interesting, in Jewish law, Mount Sinai is not holy. Not only is Mount Sinai not holy, we don't even know where it is. We don't even care where it is. And furthermore, we gave it back to Egypt without even asking. Mount Sinai. Why is Mount Sinai not holy? Mount Carmel. God appears to the Jews on Mount Carmel. Mount Carmel is not holy. We don't care. There's a monastery over there. We don't care. What's going on over here? Why is Mount Moriah so holy? There's a beautiful concept over here. And that is what happened straight after the revelation of Sinai. Peter, can you turn up the heat? Thanks. What happened to the revelation of Sinai? The Jews saw God. They saw this revelation. They had the 10 Commandments. But it was all artificial. Because 40 days later, what happens? They're serving a golden calf. It was an artificial revelation. Elevated themselves to a high level. Artificially. What happens after an artificial high? Crash. Person comes down. Tremendous crash. I'll give you an example. Person goes to a party. And he's happy and he's laughing and he's got a bit of booze and he's happy and he's really happy. What happens the day after? Hangover. Crash. Person's on a tremendous high. The higher they go, if it's artificial, tremendous crash. The same thing is true in spiritual things. Person gets to a tremendous high, spiritually on a tremendous high, but if it's artificial high, the next day is going to be a hangover, a spiritual hangover. You see these people coming to Yom Kippur. One day a year, Jews come into the synagogue. Some of them are just bored out of their wits. But some of them are actually praying. Some of them are artificially high. The day after, they say, it's past. It's gone. The spirituality left. That's why the Jewish system is, it's not a one-day-a-year affair. It's an ongoing affair every day. Because the person who just gets a spiritual high once, the next day is going to be a tremendous hangover. That's why we don't aim for spiritual highs. We aim for a constant growth level. It's not good for a person to change overnight and go from the low to the high and then the next day change back because there's going to be a big crash. We always aim for spiritual growth in small steps, small increments. Judaism is based on small steps. It's a religion of small steps. It's not all or nothing. A person comes along and says, you know what, I can't keep 613 commandments. The truth is there are no 613 commandments today because most of them don't apply. There's around 170 something commandments today. A person says, I can't keep 170 commandments. Then do what you can. Every day try and build on what you have. Or every year try and build on what you have. Try and grow in one area every day. Try and grow in one area every year. Just keep growing. Steady growth is more important than big bangs, because big bangs lead to destruction. They lead to artificial highs. And that's what happened at Mount Sinai. They saw this beautiful vision, artificial high. They were so high up there. When Moses disappeared, the high vanished as well. Who's going to lead them? Where's the next high? They crashed. Mount Carmel, the same thing. They see this magnificent vision with Elijah doing his great works, his miracles. Artificial high. Yes! They take a line which we sing on Yom Kippur. God is God. Adonai wa Elohim. God is our Lord. They sing it twice. They're artificially high, inspired. When the queen attacks Elijah, no one lifts a finger to help him. So it's an artificial high. Compare that to what happened at Mount Moriah. Mount Moriah was not an artificial high. Here was Abraham, who was tested over and over again in terms of his love of God. And that was not an artificial high, that was a continuous growth. Abraham was continually growing over and over again, and that's why the mountain was sanctified. We sanctify the mountain. Artificial highs do not sanctify anything. We have to continuous growth sanctifies. Anything else does not sanctify. Let me give you another example. There's an interesting custom after Shabbat is over. Everyone's seen the custom of Havdalah? There's a cup of wine, you say a blessing on a candle, and there's also some smelling perfume, some spices, something that's smelling nice. What is those smelling, what do we smell these things for? What's the idea of smelling these things? Right, so the Talmud says, it's like smelling salts. What happened? The Shabbat, the Sabbath is leaving. A person feels low now. The Sabbath is like an artificial high. A person who's been involved in the 7th day a week, you just turn off everything. It's great, you feel elevated. You're busy serving God for one day. But it's an artificial high. So what happens after the Shabbat is over? We need smelling salts to revive ourselves. We're like so depressed. It's an artificial high. We're crashing now. We're back to the mundane. We're crashing into the mundane. We need to revive ourselves. So we have something to smell. However, after Yom Tov, after a festival, there are no smelling spices. In the Havdalah after Yom Tov, there are no spices. Why? The rabbis say because Yom Tov is sanctified by us, Shabbat is sanctified automatically. The 7th day of the week comes every time. That's sanctified automatically. The festivals are not sanctified automatically. They are sanctified by the Jews in the new moon. When the Jews sanctify the new moon, they count the days to the festival. We sanctify the festivals. When we sanctify something, that sanctity is not let leave us. The sanctity remains with us. It's a sanctity which we achieved through small growth. It's not an artificial high. That is retained with us. So we see over here the idea of artificial highs, how dangerous they are. You see people who swing like pendulums. One day they're like this. You ever seen these people? One day they're like this. They're very much into religion. The other day they're crashed out of religion. They come back into religion. They go out of religion. They're into these artificial highs. You get them psyched up. They go and do this. After a while, you lost them. Why? Because you psych them up for a while. You pump them up for a while. You pump anyone up with gas for a while. The adrenaline is going. The spiritual adrenaline is going. When the adrenaline wears out, they're back to normal. That's the artificial highs you've got to watch out for. It's just continuous growth and not the artificial highs. And that's what we see from the story of Elijah. But he runs away. The queen's after him. He runs into Beersheba. He leaves his servant in Beersheba. He goes into the Negev, in the desert. He says, God, please kill me. Let me die. I've had enough. It's hard to be a prophet. I don't want to be a prophet because the mission of the prophet is to relate his prophecies to the Jewish people. The Jewish people sometimes would not want to hear these things. In fact, we find stories of prophets who were killed by the Jews. Prophet Zechariah was killed in the temple, no less. In the temple itself, on the Temple Mount, prophesying to the Jews, you've got to change, you've got to become better people. They didn't want to hear this. They killed him in cold blood. So that was one of the problems of being a prophet. Elijah was luckier. They couldn't get their hands on him. And God protected him. So he runs in the desert, he's depressed. God, kill me. God tells him to go to the Sinai. He goes to Sinai, he goes to Mount Sinai, and there he gets a revelation, a beautiful revelation. Again, beautiful ideas over here. First, there's winds, mighty winds, tremendous winds, hurricane. Then there's an earthquake. Then there's fire. So the Bible tells us beautifully, it says, God was not in the earthquake. God was not in the wind. God was not in the fire. And then there was a small, still voice. And God was in the voice. You know, sometimes we see things. You know what? That's an act of God. It's such a massive thing. It's got to be something big to be an act of God. But the little things in life we take for granted, that's not God. Isn't that interesting? You know, ever thought about it? What is the most powerful energy which we have? Peter, what's the most powerful energy we have? Energy. In terms of, you want to make energy. How do they produce energy today? What's the most powerful kind of energy today? Nuclear, right? How do you produce nuclear energy? From what? Thank you. Little atoms. That's what God is teaching Elijah. God is teaching Elijah, you think, these big things, you know, you're so impressed by the big things, let's start working on the small things. The small things, that's where everything starts from something small. The most powerful are the small things. There's a beautiful story in the Talmud. The Talmud says, in the time of the Roman persecution, the Romans were killing all the rabbis. They were stopping people from learning Torah. The Torah is nearly wiped out. That's when they started writing down things. They wrote down the Mishnah and they started writing down the Talmud. So that the rabbis were debating, what's going to happen? What's going to be the future? The Torah is going to be lost from the Jewish people. The Torah is lost from the Jewish people. There's no Jewish people anymore. Because what makes Judaism so unique is not what we eat, as opposed to what most people think, you know, bagels and lox or whatever it is, chicken soup. It's not what we eat that makes us Jewish. It's what our heritage is. If we don't have a heritage, we're not Jews anymore. We lose it. If we lose our heritage, we lose being Jewish. So the rabbis were discussing this. One rabbi said, don't worry. If you lose the whole Torah, with my tremendous intellect, I will bring it all back. It's all in my memory banks. I can rewrite the whole Torah by memory. There was another rabbi there who was a practical guy. He goes off and he says, he writes the 5 books of Moses on 5 different scrolls. He gets 5 little kids and he teaches 1 book to each kid. He says, you, Genesis, you, Exodus, you, Leviticus, you, Numbers, and you, Deuteronomy. Each one learns 1 book by heart. He says, now you teach your book to him, you teach your book to him, until each one became, they knew the whole 5 books by heart. Each one of them knew 5 books by heart. Then he took 6 other kids. He wrote the 6 parts of the Mishnah on 6 scrolls, gave one to each kid. He taught each one. So now you teach you, you teach you, you teach you. Someone says, because of Rabbi Chia, this rabbi, the Torah was not forgotten from Israel. Well, it's not something big. We don't have to do things which are big and massive. It's the small day-to-day things which are so important. And most people think, I need inspiration. I want to do something. I want to discover something. It's the small acts in daily life which people can do. You put a little money in the pushka. What do? I put a little money in the pushka. That's a big thing. Those little things which add up over time. It's like, what they tell you? When you're investing, what do they tell you? Put money away every month. Because with compounding, it adds up. Every little bit you put. It's better than putting one big sum in one time. Put small sums over and over again. That's exactly the same in a spiritual way. It's the small things which count. Small things build up into big things. Person's surprised. I put $100 a month. You know how much that became? I wish I did. I'm just talking. But you know that much that became? It's a small amount over time can become big things. So same thing in our daily lives. It's the small things. That's what God was teaching Elijah. Elijah, don't worry. You think it's all the big things. You think the people are going to be spiritual giants. You've got to be happy with the small things they do. That's the same idea of sending Elijah to all the circumcisions. See, look, the Jews. Even these things, small things, they're keeping all these things. Don't look for big. Not everyone's going to be a prophet like Elijah. Not everyone's going to be a Moses. We've got to be happy with people living the mundane lives and also being spiritual, doing small spiritual things at the same time. That's the beauty of one of the visions of Elijah. But it's not the small things. It's not the big things that count. It's the small things that count. Elijah goes back and he anoints his star student as his next in line, Elisha. Very similar names. You had Elijah and you had Elisha, Eliyahu and Elisha. In Hebrew, Elisha was meant to take over from Elijah. And what happens? He takes him away from his parents' house and they go together and he gives him his last instructions. And then he tells Elisha, he says, now I'm going to cross the river Jordan. So Elisha sees this. He says, he knows what's going on. He says, my master is going to leave me. He says, please, my master, he says, I have a last wish. He says, what do you want? He says, I want double of what you had. Your amount of prophecy, I want double as much. So Elijah told him, he says, if you can see where I'm going, that's a sign you're going to get it. In other words, this chariot of fire was a vision. If you're going to see where I'm going to go, if you can see this vision, that means you're a prophet on my level and even higher, and you're going to get this prophecy. Not everyone could see this, the idea that God, he went up on a chariot. This is not a... So that's what happened in the end is he sees him going up in this tremendous vision of the chariot of fire. This chariot of fire, which, fiery chariot. Okay, we can understand the different levels. There's a book by von Daniken called The Chariot of the Gods, where he posits that this is the story of UFOs. The UFO landed, took Elijah, and God was really an alien from outer space who came and gave this book and trying to change society. It's very similar to the Foundation trilogy. If you ever read Isaac Asimov, Isaac Asimov and the Foundation trilogy, very, very interesting. But really, if you read through it, it's not far from the Bible. In fact, Asimov himself, Isaac Asimov, wrote a translation of the Bible. He's really a spiritual person, very spiritual man. There's a Bible by Isaac Asimov, so a version of the Bible. But what happened was, there's a big debate about what actually happened in this vision of the chariot. We find the Kabbalists have their own version of accounts. But the Zohar says that Elijah basically was not a human being. Elijah from the beginning was an angel who was put in this world, not a human being. who wandered this world to fulfill the mission of God. And when his mission was up, he got taken back up. That's basically what Elijah was. It's one opinion. That's the Kabbalistic version of the account, that Elijah was never a human being in the first place. There's another Kabbalistic account which explains what Elijah was. It ties two figures of the Bible together. It ties the figure of Pinchas. Pinchas was the grandson of Aaron. Pinchas was a firebrand. Pinchas was the zealot. Pinchas was a man who would take the law into his own hands when he felt that God's honor was at stake. And it compares Pinchas's actions with the actions of Elijah, who is, the Talmud used to say, was also a firebrand. Was also a man, a zealot for God, would rebuke the king, wouldn't think anything of it, would rebuke the people whenever he felt like it. A firebrand. So it tries to put both personalities together. And either was a reincarnation, Elijah was a reincarnation of Pinchas, or was the same person who lived on into Elijah and eventually will keep on living on. Sort of figure which is hovering between a human figure and an angelic figure, a person who could retain their physical attributes and also their spiritual attributes by elevating the body into a soul. In other words, he could transform his physical body into a soul. The body became so holy itself, was transformed into a soul, and vice versa. He could come down and adopt a physical posture as well. So this Elijah character is a physical, spiritual character which can adopt both characteristics. Can alternate between physical, spiritual as many times as he wants. In fact, the Kabbalists also refer to it as a higher form of meditation, which is interesting. Which is probably the most accurate thing, is a vision of Elijah is considered part of a meditative trance. The highest level today we can reach, we cannot reach prophecy. We always say prophecy today is too far away from us. There's no more prophets today. The highest level we can reach is called Gilui Eliyahu. And we start seeing the prophet Elijah, and he teaches us. And the great rabbis and figures were reputedly on that level where they could get to this level of meditation, where they would, which is called Gilui Eliyahu. I don't know what they see. Would they actually see the man? I don't think they see a person, but they would actually get some sort of messages going backwards and forwards, which is called the state of Gilui Eliyahu, which is interesting. So as Elijah is not a physical state, it's a state in which the very high spiritual beings can come along and think about and meditate and receive some sort of communication from Elijah, which is called Gilui Eliyahu. So that's basically the ideas of Elijah. We have other customs based on it. We mention Elijah at the end of Shabbat. There are songs, the Sephardic ritual, in Yiddish as well, both phrases to Elijah. Why? Because at the end of Shabbat we start a mundane week. And we find there was a miracle where Elijah was involved in, where he blessed the mundane. As we mentioned, there was a famine. He proclaimed a famine right at the beginning of his, when Ahab started bringing idolatry. And he himself was short of food. So he goes to a certain town, which was a non-Jewish town in the north of Israel, in Tyre. And he asked a widow, he saw an old lady over there, and he asked her for food. And she says, I only have 1 cup of flour left and 1 cup of oil. And he tells her, don't worry. That cup is going to last you forever. That flour is going to last you forever. Go and bake me a cake. So she goes and bakes him a cake. And eventually he moves into the attic. And she sustains him for a year with that same cup of flour and that same cup of oil. So you see over there that Elijah had the power to bless the mundane. And that's why this custom of singing songs of Elijah came after Shabbat. Because we're going into the mundane week. We want Elijah to come and bless us on the mundane. There's another beautiful story which is brought down in the Bible, which is the story of the revival of the dead, which also links us to Elijah and the future events. That is the same woman. This woman he stayed with had a son, and after a while the son apparently dies. And she comes to him, she says, look, I'm helping you. You brought me bad luck. You got my son? I'll have my son. He says, give me the boy. Takes the boy into his room, prays to God, help me save this boy. So he lies on top of him. I don't know if he knew artificial respiration or whatever he knew. He's warming up the body, breathing into him, and the boy revives. And that's the link in Talmudic literature between the coming of Elijah, as the prophet Malachi mentions, and the revival of the dead. So he was given these powers. We see from the story he was given these powers, the power of blessing the mundane, which is brought down into Jewish legend, and also the power of revival of the dead. That's brought down also in the legends which revolve around the messianic coming, revival of the dead. Elijah is going to come, he's going to revive the dead. And that's another beautiful idea, concept which we have in Judaism, is the concept, what is the revival of the dead? On a simplistic account, it can be understood as life after death, basically. That's kind of revival. That's what the Maimonides seems to be saying in one section, is when we talk about the revival of the dead, doesn't mean the dead are going to come up from live, the cemeteries are going to sprout human beings. Revival of the dead means that there is life after death. So on one level we can understand the revival of the dead as being life after death. And that's basically the story of Elijah. Any questions? Any questions? Okay, we'll stop here and we'll continue next week.